Just a quick content warning. Some of today's stories may have disturbing content, and viewer discretion is advised. And if you got a story you want to send my way, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. Four years ago, I trained a new worker who was honestly a nice guy at the time. Early 30s, seemingly healthy, very much into yoga and had a beautiful girlfriend, etc. He seemed very balanced and healthy. I'll call him coworker A. We had another longtime coworker who was sort of Mr. Popular with the managers, but honestly, super annoying. A really large personality, and people mutually could only take him in small doses. He was essentially the embodiment of a TikTok frat boy who would randomly dance on the job and freestyle. Extremely annoying. Anyways, I'll call him coworker B. Now, before I explain, I should include that this workplace sucks. It barely holds a single star on Indeed. It's a large factory with no windows, toxic management, long hours. It was very hard on most people's mental health. So, anyway, roughly a year into coworker A's stay, things started changing. He and I were mutually friendly to one another, and we would have long civilized discussions about interesting things, but something was really out of place when he mentioned his new beliefs about the world being flat and a hologram moon theory. It was really unlike the old version of him who was super rational. I sort of shrugged it off and said it's probably a phase or he's just trolling. Fast forward a few weeks, coworker A has seemingly took a lot of interest in coworker B and sort of developed some of his mannerisms, but in a more endearing way. Kind of copying his silly dances and laughs seemed harmless. But as months go past, he continued to dance more and more to the point that he had to be asked to stop by supervisors. He would even be moving around at the morning meetings, using all the same mannerisms and phrases as coworker B, to the point that he switched shifts. We theorized that maybe he was on drugs, but coworker A was very vocal against all substance use, including alcohol and weed. He was also a vegan. Where things change for the worse is when coworker B ends up getting with a new hire at work. She ends up becoming his girlfriend. They then move in together. This is when coworker A shows up to work using coworker B's name, even signing himself in on the logbook as him, referring himself as B all morning. Then, later that day, A stands up on a work table screaming, "I'm in love with coworker B's girlfriend," by name, with his arms spread out in a cross Jesus formation, face to the ceiling. The whole place was silent, and after he ended up standing in a corner with a broom, sweeping nothing for the next several hours. He wouldn't turn around from the corner either, not even when tapped on the shoulder or called by name. The only time that I saw him away from that corner was when it was time to go home. He was the last one out. Unfortunately, my job being QC, I'm always among the last ones as well. Despite both of us being the last in the building, I did my best to act normal when passing him in the hallway. I glanced at him. He was looking directly at me, head tilted down, making a pseudo-snarling dog face, eyebrows in a V, tongue and teeth out. The next day, our boss decided that coworker A needed to go to the hospital, so we actually made an appointment and got him in with an Uber. He was put on leave for a week. The security guards who I was friend with told me that A was showing up in the middle of the night, trying to sign in for work at the card reader, sometimes 2 to 3 in the morning. Anyway, surprisingly, a week later, coworker A comes back and seems somewhat normal, almost like he has no recollection of anything he did. He even wrote an entire album on his phone in that time, which surprisingly was better than I thought it would be. But I noticed it was all love lyrics, sort of wanky country love songs. As things seemed to normalize with coworker A, he stated that he really wanted to hang out with me and go for a hike, throw axes at trees, etc. I sort of didn't agree or disagree, and told him I would get back to him on that, as I secretly was a little on edge. He asked me later that day if I was still down, and I said unfortunately that I had other obligations. He said, "Well, I guess I can't throw an axe at your face then." And I laughed, not knowing how to react at all. I told the manager about that, and he kind of just scratched his head uncomfortably and shrugged his shoulders. Anyway, coworker A ends up finding coworker B's address due to a work get-together where everyone was invited and someone leaked it to coworker A. They eventually find rocks and sticks in weird formations on their doorstep like shrines, and we all collectively knew that it was A. Things got really weird when they actually found A looking through their windows at night. He was also scratching the window with his nails, calling out B's name, repeatedly whispering, "B, I need to tell you something." This is when our manager finally decided to take action and agreed to fire A. 4 years later, coworker A still stalks coworker B's now ex-girlfriend, who had to get a restraining order against him. He annually makes new Facebook accounts and adds all 200 plus workers who used to work there, as the place got shut down. He uses a new name each time with a different selfie. He then sends a message to each one of us as well, saying, "Hey, you, it's B from work." So, I guess that my question is, what would this behavior be called? And how did such a normal, likable, level-headed person turn into this? Is there a term for this behavior? What would your diagnosis be? One of my friends had the gall to ask him in a reply, which I can share a screenshot of if he recalls anything, in which he doesn't seem to, but he sure remembers B's ex-girlfriend and says some extremely concerning things. About how she's the one and the only, how he's the bigger one and she's the smaller one. He was put on this earth essentially to save her. He also seemingly has no support at all from family or anything like that. And he's working at a new job, living alone, unattended. I feel like this is sort of a risk. Anyways, I'm interested in some of your feedback of what he might be dealing with. This happened in the American Southwest to my parents while on vacation. They stopped at a spot along their travel route to get some food and got talking to a young local who worked there. He told them about a box canyon that was on the way to their next stop. For those who don't know, a box canyon is characterized by being narrow, having high vertical walls, and a flat bottom. To hear my mom tell it, he described the canyon with an almost spiritual reverence, saying that it was incredibly beautiful and had superb acoustics, and that he loved taking his guitar out there to play. My folks liked doing stuff off the beaten path, so they decided to pay a visit. The canyon seemed to be quite isolated, with no buildings of any kind around it for miles. By the time they parked their car and made it to the canyon's entrance, the sun was just starting to go down. They said that they seemed to be the only ones there, with no parked cars other than their own. They made their way into the canyon. After the fact, my parents have both said that they separately, without speaking of it, started to feel a touch of unease. Not totally unreasonable, as it was starting to get dark and the canyon walls pressed closed on either side. Despite this feeling, they continued on, until they heard the noise. My parents report the nature of this noise differently. When I ask them to describe it, their faces sort of scrunch up, like it's an effortful task, or they're still uncertain. My dad says it sounded like a person, possibly a man, speaking a low single word that he didn't understand. My mom says that it didn't really sound like a word of any kind to her, just a strange, deep noise that rang out from somewhere nearby above them. It was accompanied by a brief, intense flash of pale light. Neither of them knew what it was or where precisely it had come from, but they both were immediately filled with dread and an overwhelming desperation to get the hell out of the canyon. They turned around and they booked it back to their car. As they exited the dark, closed space of the canyon, my mom describes feeling certain that there was something chasing them, and thinking that once they got to their car, they would find it sabotaged. That, thankfully, was not the case, and they were able to get in and speed away down the empty road. My mom said that she didn't feel safe until they had been driving for a while, still having the panicked but totally unsupported notion that they were being pursued. When they eventually spoke of it to one another, they weren't able to make any real sense out of what had happened. Neither one of them really has a theory. This is probably pretty dull as far as spooky experiences goes, but neither of my parents have a history of weird encounters or of telling tales, so it strikes me to see them both get re-creeped out by the mere memory of this incident. Edit. I've asked my mom clarifying questions since I first recorded this story, and I forgot to update it. She said that the flash of light was actually quite close to them, mere feet away, and that it sort of seemed to hang in the air for a few moments. She had a hard time describing it very clearly. I grew up in the 90s in Minnesota. My parents divorced when I was 8, and we spent every other weekend at my dad's haunted house in East Bethel. This house had every type of ghost that you could think of. A shadow man in a trench coat and brimmed hat, another separate shadow figure that danced down the hallway, a man dressed to go fishing, a doppelganger of my father, 2 giggling little girl ghosts, and many other unseen entities. The dishwasher, radios, and lights would turn themselves on and off randomly. Loud banging would be heard on walls and doors. Door handles would jiggle and turn on their own. Feelings of being touched or caressed in the shower were reported. My father also had an incident where he felt someone crawl into bed with him in the middle of the night, when he was the only one home. My uncle reported hearing 2 little girls giggling and singing in the basement one night while sleeping downstairs. Upon awakening the next morning, he discovered that there were no kids in the house that night. Also, there was a salamander plague one night. The entire yard was covered in slimy, slithering salamanders. It only ever happened once. I'm not positive if that's paranormal, but it's certainly strange. One sunny Saturday morning, while visiting my dad, my brother and I were up early watching cartoons. I was 8 years old and my brother was 3. As we sat on the couch, we heard 3 knocking sounds on the wall 5 to 6 feet behind us. Just knock, knock, knock. Our heads quickly snapped back to look at the wall where the sound was coming from, but we saw nothing. My brother and I quickly turned to look at each other with frightened eyes. I, being the older sister, tried to be brave. I told him it was nothing. As we turn our attention back to the cartoons, my little 8-year-old brain is spinning. What if that banging noise we heard wasn't just the pipes, as I'd been told so many times? What if it was a ghost? I hate when the ghosts come around. Why isn't my dad around whenever this happens? As these thoughts swirl in my head, we hear it again. Knock, knock, knock. This time it is coming from somewhere in the kitchen off to our left. It's not as loud as the first time, and the sound is different. Like someone is knocking on the kitchen counter this time instead of the wall. We quickly strain our necks to peek inside the kitchen with lightning speed to catch whomever, or whatever, is making that noise. Again, there's nothing there. I take a deep breath, and once again I pretend to be brave and tell my brother, it's nothing, just ignore it. My heart is thumping in my chest and there are butterflies in my stomach as the familiar anxiety grows worse and worse with each passing second. I tuck myself up on the couch in a ball, not wanting my legs to dangle off the edge, I no longer feel safe, and nothing is to be trusted. Knock, knock, knock. This time the sound is coming from the dining room. I could tell the noise is coming from the wooden dining table this time. I can see the entire table from where I'm sitting with ease, and there is nothing on the table that should be making that noise. No one except myself and my brother are awake. There's no one in the dining room. There is no logical reason for this knocking noise to be moving around us. Just then, I realized the knocking sounds have been moving in a big circle around us. If the invisible entity is to move any closer to us, the next logical place would be for it to be in the living room where me and my brother are currently sitting. No sooner than that thought crossed my mind, it happened again. Knock, knock, knock. This time the noise was coming from the coffee table sitting less than 1 foot away from us. I instantly flip over the back of my couch in a reverse somersault-like motion, and I run at superhuman speed to my father's bedroom. In my panic, I completely left my little 3-year-old brother behind to fend for himself. Luckily, he wasn't too far behind. We sneak into our father's room and quietly lay on the floor. Our dad would have been super mad if we woke him up early on a Saturday morning, even for a ghost. In our commotion, we wake up our 6-year-old sister who's sleeping on our dad's floor. Us 3 kids always slept on his floor together when we were visiting. So, we quietly whisper what just happened out in the living room to our sister. As we're telling her the story, something catches our eye. We could see a black shadow under the small space between the bottom of the door and the plush carpet. This black shadow is slowly pacing back and forth in the hallway just on the other side of the bedroom door. Just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, like the shadow is waiting for us. Unfortunately, I don't remember what happened after this point. Somehow the rest of that memory has been lost with time, but I know for sure that we did not open that door. As an adult, I often wish that I would have been brave and opened the door. What would have been waiting? Would the entity have entered the room and attacked? Would we have been shocked and confused to find the hallway empty? Would the gray shadow just keep pacing the hallway, oblivious to our frightened, curious eyes? I've done a lot of research on the home and property over the years, and I can't find any evidence of a death or tragedy that would account for so much paranormal activity. I've also reached out to the previous and current owners to see if they had any strange experiences. The 2 families who lived there previously said they never had any strange experiences, nor did the family who lived there right after my family. The family currently living there did not respond to my question, and in hindsight, I regret even asking them. It wasn't cool of me to even put that thought in their heads. Prior to the home being built, all I can find is that the land the house sits on was part of a farm for a family that I could find very little information on. So, was my family haunted? Or were we all suffering from a 12-plus year mass hysteria? I'm going to try to explain this as best as I can remember. This happened when I was in high school, probably around 16, 17, and I'm now 27, so please forgive me if I can't recall every detail. At the time, I had a girlfriend. There's a hip little neighborhood in our city called Kensington that we would always meet up at to spend time together. She lived far north in the city, and I was pretty far south. Kensington was right around the middle and a nice place to hang out. We were walking away from the train platform, almost a full block away, when a man in a suit comes running at us with a panicked look on his face. Frantically, he says, "Can you help me? My wife just went into labor and I was supposed to meet my sister at Starbucks in a couple of minutes, but I need to run to the hospital. Can you please bring her this bag?" And he then holds out a plastic shopping bag. I believe it was for the makeup store Zara. My girlfriend kind of nudges my arm, obviously thinking this is a little sketchy, but I say, "Yeah, for sure." He tells me her name, we'll say that it's Sarah, thanks me and runs straight for the train platform. Starbucks is a few blocks away and we walk as my girlfriend is saying, "This is creepy. What if we're drug mules?" Then I realize that the bag is strangely light, I tell her and she suggests that we look inside. I'm conflicted by this, but concede that it is reasonable seeing as how odd this whole situation was. When we look in the bag, all that's there is a couple of crumpled up receipts and another crumpled up bag. We open the second bag and there's nothing inside. We're freaked out. We're considering just turning around and not going into the Starbucks, but my curiosity has gotten the best of me at this point. We walk the remaining block or two, and as I walk into the Starbucks, I call out, "Sarah?" A woman stands up, yells very emphatically, "Thank you so much. I have to go to the hospital now to be there for the birth, but I appreciate this so much." She throws her arms around me in a huge hug and then runs out the door. And that's it. I looked up social experiments, TV shows, and every couple of years I remember and Googled to see if anyone has experienced something similar. But nothing. Never have had a reasonable suggestion that makes sense to me, and it's just something that bothers me when I think about it. These weren't university-aged people. These were adults in their late 30s or 40s at least. So, I don't think that it was a school project or anything. Any idea what this could have been for? And what the purpose of the whole interaction was? I had a ton of stories about the time I lived in Scotland with my friend Jane. I've posted them to different Reddit subs and threads, by the way, but what I'm about to tell you is more terrifying than ghosts, since it's real life. Jane and I used to go dancing at nightclubs near Buchanan, a popular area in Glasgow. We used to meet nice people there, often drunk yet funny and harmless. Until the day we crossed paths with a guy named Kyle. Kyle kept staring at my friend Jane. To reassure Jane and protect her, I pretended to be her brother. But that didn't stop Kyle, who started hitting on her heavily with his glass of whiskey and his weird looks. Jane laughed to cool the heavy atmosphere, because I could see how much it bothered her to be approached like this, as he didn't even respect her safe space. Eventually, I broke off the conversation, but the guy followed us everywhere. With his dumb friend, he even took a picture of Jane in secret. That was too much. I kindly asked him to stop in a quiet, no-pressure way. He seemed okay. I just didn't want to start a fight in a club and be kicked out of a place we liked. While we were dancing with Jane, she noticed that the guy gave her a sign. He moved his finger on his throat like he was cutting it. She totally lost it. Told me about it. We immediately ran away and even managed to hide from Kyle, who didn't show himself for a while. When the club closed, Jane and I went to a fast food restaurant, waiting for the first buses to go home. Jane felt very uncomfortable after this experience, as she had survived an attempted murder. Her ex-boyfriend's brother tried to kill her with a knife. He even killed his own mother, wanted to stab Jane's ex. He's now in a psychiatric hospital and locked up. As she was very traumatized, I tried to make her laugh, to change the subject as she asked me to. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Kyle came back again. His shirt was stained with blood. He came closer to us with his friend and said, "I bravely fought with a guy in the streets. Luckily, I always keep a knife on me." After the trauma she experienced, Jane was not sensitive to this bad boy stuff, even if he was so proud about it. I asked him to go away. The situation was tense because he wanted to hit me. Bless the guard that kicked him out, though. That night, Jane was very brave. When we came back to France, the story seemed to be behind us, but Kyle actually managed to find her on Tinder, after more than a year, and even recognized her. But I hope that we never see that bad guy again. I hope my story has its place in this subreddit. I still don't know if it really happened or not. I don't even think I've told anyone this story. I've always been a shy kid. I didn't think anyone would believe me because I had a hard time believing myself anyways. So I kept the story for me. And this kind of story stays in the back of your mind and comes back up once in a while, having you thinking, dang, that was crazy. When I, currently 28 female, was around 10 years old, my parents, my little brother and my little sister, my grandma and I went for a road trip to Virginia Beach for a 1-week vacation. During the vacation, one day we were at the beach, as you do in Virginia Beach, when we saw a bunch of wild dolphins in the water that seemed not that far away from the shore. My grandma and dad decided to take foam bodyboards to try to get as close as possible to them, which is kind of crazy now that I know how cruel dolphins can be. As a 10-year-old that loved water and was far from afraid of it, I tried to join them a little later, so I took a bodyboard and started swimming to where they were. I remember swimming for a while, when I heard a lifeguard whistle and tell my dad and grandma to come back to shore, because I guess they were a little too far for them. I looked back to see how far I was, and I realized I had swam a good distance. It had been a while since my feet touched the sand at the bottom of the ocean. I wasn't afraid at all. I've always been a good swimmer and knew that I could come back to shore anytime I wanted. But I remember I started to panic a little, not really realizing why. I started thinking about the fact that there was a lot of water between the seafloor and myself. I usually don't care, but this time I started thinking about sharks. Since my brain started thinking about it, I had the reflex to look around me while I was on the board and look down in the water. I was already telling myself how silly I was for being afraid of sharks, and that there would be absolutely nothing there when I locked eyes with it. I honestly think that my heart stopped. I saw a shark's face underneath the waterline, just looking up at me. Then I did something incredibly stupid, which was to try and get to the shore as quick as possible. Probably looking like running prey, but nothing happened. I managed to get to shore, and I don't think I have ever swam that fast. From what I researched and what I remember, I feel like the shark, if it was real, could have been a sand tiger because I remember vividly that I could see its teeth even if its mouth was closed, and its size would match the size of the head that I saw. I've never had hallucinations for things that I fear before, and I don't even especially fear sharks, and I have anxiety. So, I highly doubt that it would happen only once and then never again. Don't really know what to think with that one. I'm wondering, did I have a premonition that danger was close? Or did my brain make up a shark because I was scared? I would love to have opinions on that encounter, even if I'm never gonna know for sure if what I saw was real. So, yesterday my mom told me a story about something that had happened to her at work. My mom has always been a huge skeptic, as I have been myself, but this has properly freaked us both out as we can't explain it. I'm curious what others think. My mom works at a pharmacy as a dispenser. She has a colleague that she talks to every day, who is also a skeptic but has interest in the paranormal. She told my mom a story about how she went to visit a graveyard to visit a loved one with one of her friends. They were the only ones in the graveyard, but they heard a female humming. They assumed it was someone crouching behind a grave, tending to it, and they had a look around. They eventually came to a grave where the sound appeared to be coming from, but nobody was there. They checked their phones and any other devices, nothing. A little freaked out, they went to the pub nearby and had some food. As they were chatting, they both went silent at the same time and froze as they could hear the humming again. They carried on eating and eventually parted to go home. Later that night, my mom's colleague got a call from her friend who was hysterical. She cried on the phone and said that she had heard the humming in her house. Mom's colleague calmed her down and reassured her that it was nothing and that she was probably just hearing things. After putting the phone down, she went upstairs to bed as it was late. She heard the humming in her bedroom. My mom, upon being told this, wasn't that amazed, as she just brushed it off as a story, being the skeptic that she is. She left the room and walked down the long hallway leading to the top of the stairs. She said she heard a female humming right behind her. Different notes, but only lasting 2 to 3 seconds. She turned around to laugh at her colleague, thinking she was taking the mick, but nobody was there. Her colleague was still in the room on the other end of the hallway, far too far away to be heard, and nobody else was on that floor with them. There's no PA system or any kind of speakers, and she didn't have her phone or anything on her. I've never seen my mom so freaked out before, as she's a very straight-laced person and always tries to debunk anything paranormal. I can't think of anything either, so what do you guys think? So, friends, that was this week's Wednesday video. Just a collection of some scary Reddit stories, a grab bag of scary stories, if you will. A true scary story collection, as I used to call them. You can call them whatever you want, as long as you just call them entertaining, interesting, and something you enjoyed. And if not, well, that's okay. Anyways, good collection of stories. Definitely some weird ones, some creepy ones. Yeah. Not a whole lot more to say other than that, just some good stories today. And a huge thank you, obviously, to everyone who let me use their stories. That's always appreciated. And an even bigger thank you to anyone who listened to this point and is hearing me ramble this strange, stupid stuff that I'm rambling. You're amazing. Hope you know it. If you enjoyed today's video, please do hit that thumbs up button, as it helps tremendously. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider subscribing. Subscribble to the chibble, if you will. Or subscribe to the channel. I don't know. If you're feeling really bold, you can go down below the video and leave me a comment, letting me know your thoughts, how you're doing, how your day is going, how the weather is, what you're having for dinner tonight, what you're having for breakfast tomorrow. Anything you want. I genuinely appreciate it if you do. All that said, friends, I hope you're having a beautiful day. I don't mean to make this outro short. I don't know why it's so much shorter than my other ones. I'm rambling like I always do, but yeah. Hope you know that you're loved, you're important, you're the best you that you can be. Never let anyone tell you otherwise, and please never forget it, ever. My friends, until I see you again, much love, and sleep well.